A Space Force commander fired for talking about Marxism penetrating the United States military. Isn't this fascinating? You know what the problem they have with this is? Partisan activity from a active duty member. Wait a second. I didn't think that Marxism was something that the United States military was okay with. I thought we could, if he gave a speech about the downfalls or the problems of jihadism in the United States military, oh no, that'd probably be an issue too. I'm sure they'd find that that's a violation of diversity and inclusion standards or something. What ideologies are you not? Can you give a speech on how you don't like Nazism? Can you be anti-Nazism in the military and keep your job? Or is that a partisan thing? Well, apparently you can't be anti-Marxist and keep your job. I think this is one of the reasons why the left tries so hard to whitewash the horrors of Stalinism, as well as the very clear connections between communism and National Socialism, but that's another podcast for another time. But they try to pretend that Stalin was not a bloodthirsty mass murderer on a completely just mind-blowing scale, is because, hold on a second, you look at the history of Marxist regimes throughout the 20th century and you see misery, failure, mass starvation, mass murder, torture, rape, and brutality of all kinds at the hands of the state. That's what you see. Meanwhile, in the academy, in social media today, Hollywood, you have people that talk about Marxism as though it's kind of a cool alternative to the evil capitalism of America and the West. Sure. How can you get in trouble in the United States military for talking about Marxism and how it's infiltrating the ranks? Because it has. And because the Democrats realize that not only are they penetrated by Marxism, they are making common cause with it. They are using it. There are Marxists within the Democrat Party, just like there were communists that infiltrated the Democrats. It was always Democrats that were pro-commie. You go back in history, you see this. It was the Democrats who were the commies. You look at Alger Hiss, you look at the people who were true Soviet agents during all of this, and it was, in fact, Democrats. Okay. Important for everyone to recognize that. Let me tell you this story. This is from military.com. A commander of a U.S. Space Force unit tasked with detecting ballistic missile launches has been fired for comments made during a podcast promoting his new book, which claims Marxist ideologies are becoming prevalent in the United States military. Lieutenant Colonel Matthew Lohmeyer, commander of 11th Space Warning Squadron at Buckley Air Force Base, Colorado, was relieved from his post by Lieutenant General Stephen Whiting, the head of Space Operations Command, over a loss of confidence in his ability to lead, military.com has learned. Quote, this decision was based on public comments made by Lieutenant Colonel Lohmeyer in a recent podcast. A Space Force spokesperson said in an email, Lieutenant General Whiting has initiated a command-directed investigation on whether these comments constituted prohibited partisan political activity. Irresistible Revolution, Marxism's Goal of Conquest and the Unmaking of the American Military is the book title. And this guy got fired from his job for talking about this. Isn't that interesting? Let's just do a review here. Remember some years ago, Lieutenant Colonel, I'm sorry, I can't remember what his rank was. It might have been Captain Nidal Hassan, the Fort Hood shooter. But remember some years ago when it came out that he had given numerous speeches in which he had defended jihadist suicide bombers and talked about jihad against the West, and no one did anything about it? That was okay. Right? And then, of course, later on, the guy ended up being a mass murderer of fellow service members, killing them in cold blood at close range in what was initially called by the Obama administration, and don't ever forget it, workplace violence. That was their official designation of it. Workplace violence. Yeah, sure. The guy was in touch with Anwar al-Awlaki, the terrorist mastermind from Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, but it was workplace violence, they said. Just like how recently a report came out where the FBI and the DOJ finally called the attempted mass assassination of Republican conservative members of Congress by a Bernie Sanders supporter. Yeah, they finally called, James Hodgkinson was his name. You don't really ever hear it, do you? They finally said that that was domestic terrorism. Yeah, you don't say. Before then, they were just calling it, I forget, they used some other designation for it to say that it was like a, disgruntled person or something like that. I don't know. Because they hide the truth from you. Because they're engaged in propaganda. And they definitely don't want you to figure out that there is a Marxist wave. We can all see it. It's obvious. And you're going to see a slew of books about, the Marxism that is coming and everything else because it's all over the place. It couldn't be any more clear. And here's one of the books, but this one focusing on the military. Marxism in America is very real. And the reason I think it's important to call it Marxism instead of socialism is to understand the real roots of this and how division along racial instead of class lines is the primary method of separating us from one another, of undermining the history of this country and trying to take control of its future. Because in a very wealthy society like ours, class warfare is effective, but it's not effective enough to make people hate each other. And the purpose of the racial Marxists is to create divisions rooted in disdain, in real vitriol, in real nastiness and distrust of one another. You can do that with economic warfare, but the problem is the people at the top of this who are pushing the racial Marxism, the elites in this country, don't want to get caught up in it, and they're very wealthy. So while there's some degree of hypocrisy, you can have Nancy Let Them Eat Cake Pelosi talking about how much she cares about raising taxes and everything else, but that doesn't really that doesn't, one, get her constituents that excited, and two, she's a rich old lady who lives in a mansion in San Francisco and is worth $50 million. So people can eventually put two and two together. But the support of BLM, for instance, that really moves the needle on the left. That really gets people excited and angry, and you want them angry, even if you have to lie about cops, as they do, even if you have to tell lies about how law enforcement is systemically and continuously murdering unarmed black men without consequence, which is the central lie of the BLM movement. But, if you're wondering, has the United States military been taken over at some level by Marxism and leftist dogma? Don't ever forget that back in February, Secretary of Defense, former General Austin, Secretary of Defense, ordered all military services to have a one-day stand down to talk about extremism in the ranks. And as part of that, and Lohmeyer, the author of this book, and the guy who just got fired, said he was given a book that cited the January 6th Capitol riot as extremism, but did not mention the civil disobedience and riots after George Floyd. Gee, that doesn't seem partisan at all, does it? Yes, you see the efforts to paint the January 6th riot as some serious insurrection instead of a bunch of bozos running into a building, taking photos of themselves in the Capitol. And I know that the American Greatness has video where they say that some of the Capitol police were essentially waving in some people to say, okay, you can come in and look at stuff or whatever. The way that they're doing this, the way they're framing this, is to create a perception of the extremist enemy within, which transfers over into suppression efforts against Republicans, Trump supporters, and conservatives. It's very obvious what they're doing. And I would just want to know, while we're looking at Marxism in the military, which is a large federal government-funded institution like many others, where, it has an esprit de corps and a history that brings all Americans together and is one of the few institutions in American public life that people have a real love and devotion to and want to support. But it's also a large federal bureaucracy, and we know what happens to those over time. If you have enough leftists, enough Marxists, they seize control, they seize power, and they take them over. They've done this largely within the DOJ. They've done this in the CIA, I can tell you that. They've done it in the intelligence community, and they are in the process of doing it in the United States military as well. And that should make everybody very concerned. And when you talk about it as a military member now, you can get fired. And we can all see that that's because they don't want the truth to come out. because the people that believe this want it to. They believe in Marxism. They want it to continue until it's too late. See, this is the game the left always plays. What Marxism? There's no Marxism. There's no socialism. What are you talking about? And then eventually it's, yeah, that's right. We were Marxists all along. What are you going to do about it now? We're in charge. We run things. Not only do we have all the bureaucrats, but now we've got a lot of guys with guns too. That's the game they're playing, folks. Don't forget it. Hey, Team Buck, thank you so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, please click that little thumbs up button so then it will log as liked. And also, if you want to see more great content from The First, please click subscribe.